So can you explain a
Hmm.
little bit about what the philosophers believe about the quote unquote location of God, or where God is? How would you answer this question when someone asks where is God?
Well, I mean, first of all, we need to understand, we need to clarify that what kind of God are we talking about, or what do we mean by the term God itself? What do we mean by, by God, basically? So if by God one means the necessary existence, and so obviously the necessistent must, has to be necessary in every respect. So as Ibn Sina states in his works that wajib bizat, wajib min jamiul jihad. So he has to be necessary in every aspect. So if he has to be necessary in every aspect, so he cannot be dependent upon another for the constitution of his reality, for the subsistence of his being, for his existence, because so therefore he has to be ghani al-atlaq, ghani matlaq, ghani bid-dat. Okay, he has to be absolutely self-sufficient. Okay, that is to say that he cannot be, he cannot be a composite of parts, because as I've repeated over and over again in several sessions earlier, that everything composite is basically dependent upon the parts that constitute or make up its reality, and that which is dependent is delimited, and that which is delimited is basically a quiddity, okay, the existence of which is accidental and additional in relation to it. And everything, the existence of which is accidental and additional in relation to it, is basically contingent in itself. Okay, it is devoid of existence within itself. So in itself, it is neither existent nor is it non-existent, but it is something equidistant in relation to both existence and non-existence, and is therefore dependent for the necessitation of its reality, its existence, upon an extraneous cause. And since it is dependent upon a cause for the realization of its existence, so it happens to be essentially posterior in relation to the cause of its existence, which is its efficient cause, okay, the cause that emanates existence upon this quiddity. And if it is essentially posterior in the arc of descent in relation to the cause of its existence, in relation to its existential cause or its efficient cause, so therefore it cannot be the first existent, or al-mawjood awwal. It cannot be the first cause, or illat ula, okay, since it is essentially posterior to another, i.e. the cause of its existence. And since that is the case, therefore something like that cannot be the necessary existent, because the necessary existent is the cause of all things. It is the principle of the existence of all things, okay, and without itself being the effect of another. So if God were, if God were something corporeal, if he were a body, naturally he would have to be something corporeal or bodily in order to occupy space, because that which occupies space, okay, has the form of measure, surat miqdariya. And surat miqdariya is basically a quantity. Quantity is one of the 9 Aristotelian accidental categories. So and every accident basically has its existence within a mawdu, within a subject, that subject ultimately being a substance or johar. So and this johar within which the quantity inheres is basically a three-dimensional substance called a body or a jism. Okay, so if God were to occupy space, he would be a three-dimensional substance or a jism or a body, and every body is basically a composite of matter and form. Okay, so if God were to occupy space, he would be he would have the form of measure, and if in order to have the form of measure, he would have to be a body. Okay, that is the possession of form of measure implies his being a body, and every body okay, is a composite. So God would be a composite. Okay, and every composite, as I've just outlined and explained, is basically dependent upon the parts that constitute its reality, and that which depends upon the parts, upon its parts for the constitution of its reality is essentially contingent, and therefore the effect of another. So God would be the effect of another. In other words, he would not be God, because he would not be the first truth, the first cause of the existence of all things. Therefore, from the perspective of the philosophers, God cannot be something corporeal, something bodily. He cannot occupy space. He cannot be confined within the spatio-temporal realm. He transcends the confines and the limitations of both time and space as well. So he is an absolutely immaterial, incorporeal, sublime reality, which is the reality of existence.
Absolutely. I I agree with that as well, of course. So, in one sense, though, we can talk about. So when we say Ar-Rahmanu al-Arsh istawa, that God established Himself over the throne, how particularly how did the Urafa, the mystical philosophers, how did they explain this verse? Do they take Arsh to mean the first intellect, or something related with that? So in that sense, can we say that there we affirm the meaning of this verse in that certain sense?
Yeah, I mean, like as I was just discussing earlier as well in the other group, that while it is not possible to speak of God being above, something material or corporeal, or being below something corporeal or material, in corporeal terms, in material terms, yet God can be spoken of as being above all things in a metaphysical sense, okay, in a certain other sense, okay. Why? Because the cause of the existence of a thing is essentially prior, okay, in the arc of descent in relation to its effect. Okay, so and the effect of that thing is essentially posterior in relation to its existential cause, its efficient cause in the arc of descent, the cause and nuzul. Therefore, it is only in this sense that God can be spoken of as being absolutely above everything else, since He is the the absolute cause, okay, the ultimate first cause of the existence of all things, since he is the ultimate principle of the reality of all things, okay. So it is in this sense that he can be said to be above everything else. But naturally this sense is the sense of speaking God as being above everything else is completely different from the corporeal or the material, the jismani sense in which the terms above and below are used by certain other groups of Muslims.
Yes, yes, absolutely. But in you can explain it in that particular sense as the philosophers have explained it.
Yes, yes. I mean, because definitely, when we talk about the necessary being, we're talking about a reality that basically is above everything else, in the sense that it is the cause of everything else, and it is therefore devoid of the imperfections, the privations, the limitations, and the deficiencies, the evil that basically mars or plagues the contingent beings. Okay, since God is devoid of contingency, and contingency is the root of all ontological evil. Okay, so if something is contingent, it means it lacks good essentially. Okay, essentially in itself, okay, it has basically darkness, it has evil. Okay, it is essentially batil. Okay, bizatihi batil, right? Okay, the good that it possesses derivatively, it possesses it acquires this good, okay, from another, from an extraneous source, from an external source, that external source being the good in itself, or khair mahat, khair bidatihi. So God is khair bidatihi. Okay, he does not arrive at the good that he possesses, or he does not derive the good that he possesses from another. He possesses that good in itself. Okay, when I say that he possesses that good in itself, so I do not mean that the essence or the quality of God is distinct from the good that he possesses, but what I mean to say is that his very quality and his very essence is good in itself. Okay, so when we speak of the good, we're speaking of nothing but the very essence and reality of God, or the necessary existent. Okay, so that is what I mean. So when the philosophers say that God is above everything, so by that they mean, firstly, that he is above everything, since he is the cause of the existence of everything, and the cause of the existence of all things precedes the existences of its effects. Okay, essentially, it is essentially prior to the realities and the existences of its acts or effects. And moreover, it is above everything because it transcends, or is devoid of the imperfections, the privations, the deficiencies, the weaknesses, and the ontological limitations that basically diminish the existences of its acts, that is the contingent beings. Okay, and I mean, the easiest way to describe this is by saying that God is devoid of contingency, because contingency is the root of all ontological evil, as I've just stated earlier.